But first, we drop in on the affluent surroundings of an office in Century City, Los Angeles, where Andre Previn chats to superstar Julie Andrews and her husband, film director Blake Edwards.
Julie Andrews and Blake Edwards, or Blake Edwards and Julie Andrews. In their case, billing couldn't matter less. They are among those very rare entertainment or show business couples where each party is equally famous to the other, equally well-known, equally productive, and equally well-loved by their public. I've known them for a great many years, and I'm here in Los Angeles, in their office, to talk to them. I have been in some fairly fancy offices, but I must say, I was very old before I had a place to live this nice. How many homes have you got? I mean, you have on both continents.
Not
surely.
counting offices, right?
No, not counting offices, although this would do.
Well, basically two. We live part of the year in Switzerland and part of the year here.
I mean, do you decide, well, we're going to spend 6 months in Switzerland no matter what, or does it have to coincide
No, we certainly say we're going to spend the summer in Switzerland no matter what, providing we can free up the summer, and that's lovely. And Christmas has become a wonderful tradition with the family in Switzerland.
In Switzerland?
Yes, and we get everything from grandchildren to great-grandparents and ancient aunts and uncles and so on, and they all pile in there, and we rent various places throughout the town and make it a real family Christmas.
I've never spent a Christmas in that kind of, you know, either the Austrian mountains or the Swiss mountains. It must be, I don't know, it must be like living in a complete, total children's storybook.
It's hokey. It's very
Why don't
hokey.
you come and find out?
Yeah.
I'd like that. Listen, a violent grinding of gears into something else. It would be impossible for me to come up with two people who work together as closely as you do and understand each other as well as you two do, who've had more oddly disparate backgrounds. I mean, for instance, were you actually in English music hall when you were a kid?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I've lived in England now for 20 years, and it's taken me a long time to, A, laugh at that particular kind of jokes, the kind of Brighton Pier jokes, you know, and then the song repertoire is very parochial, it's very localized, and it doesn't travel. Have you ever kind of steeped yourself in that, Blake?
No, I really haven't.
Yeah, because
When I got into music hall, it was almost on its sort of last legs. It was really dying, and so I managed to tour the country 2 or 3 times over. This is England, and get a wonderful education into the sort of into the history of it. But it had already changed, you know.
But you did that when you were a kid, a child.
From about 12 till I was about 18. Yeah.
When was Educating Archie?
When I was 13. That was a radio show.
13.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a daunting number. What did you play in Educating Archie?
I didn't. Well, actually, I played Archie's. I mean, all I did was come on and sing one solo song each week. And if I was lucky, they gave me a few lines to say, which I relished. But I was supposedly Archie Andrews' girlfriend next door, you know, that kind of thing.
Who was Archie Andrews?
He was actually a wooden dummy. I hate you had to ask, Andre.
Right, I had to ask.
Hello, Dr. Morton. Where's Archie?
I'm here. Oh, it's you, Julie. Tell me, what would you do in case of fire, eh?
Well, I could sing a song with lots of water in it. It's called the Blue Danube.
Oh, well, let's hear it, Julie.
When you did radio, Blake, was that purely as a writer?
Yes. Although, toward the end, I began directing a few shows. got
And they were all kind of tough guys, because I remember Peter Gunn and Mr. Lucky and
No, they were television. They weren't radio. But radio
Richard Diamond
Richard
was.
Diamond, Johnny Dollar.
Johnny Dollar.
Yeah.
The thing that you don't know,
Long
Andre,
nose.
is that he would not just write one show a week. How many would you do at the height of it all?
Well, there were times when I was writing 3 shows a week, and that was pretty difficult because they were all essentially whodunits, mysteries, had to be solved.
It was a great chance for a farcical series of mistakes. Did you ever
Yes.
get them mixed up?
Never got them mixed up, but I remember I was always working against the deadline, always all night long to get one show out. 5 o'clock in the morning, just finishing, and then staggering off to Schwab's when it opened up to get the breakfast, and then going back and retyping it, taking it to the program.
I miss radio in a kind of weird way. I
So
miss
do I.
radio, especially if I'm sick in bed, because you don't feel like reading, you don't want to watch. And I used to love, I remember clearly when I was a child, having the radio on. I loved that, stories, better than music.
Well, because it relied on imagination. I mean, you could do so much with. You would portray a character, but then the listener could do all sorts of embellishments. It was great.
Julie, when did you first realize you could sing? I mean, more than a nice child.
My stepfather was a fine tenor, and it was in music hall with my mother. And when they married, I was about 5 when they finally got married. And I think in an effort to get close to me, to make some contact with his new stepdaughter, my stepfather began to give me singing lessons. Now, there was an awful lot of publicity and hype that my voice had been discovered in the air raid shelters and that I sang for people during the air raids and all this kind of thing. And that is actually true. I did do that. But actually, I think I started to take lessons from my stepfather, and to his enormous surprise, he discovered that I had an adult larynx at a very young age, 7 or 8 years old, and that it was like a 4-octave range, and I could do anything.
4 octaves?
Yes, it was a 4-octave range.
Good
I could
God.
hit, wait a minute, C below a middle C to a C above top C I could do in those days.
You could have sung Boris Goodenough one night and Lucia de Lammermoor the next.
Well, I mean, it wasn't all usable, but it was certainly there in practice.
Where did you get your diction from? Because I swear, no one's diction in any field of singing that I can think of can even come close to yours. I mean, one can understand every syllable from the second balcony. I don't understand how you
I
learned
think that was my singing teacher. She said,
Really?
one of the greatest things she ever really told me in terms of singing was that hang on to your words because your voice will follow, and finish your words and make your consonants sharp and hard, and your vowels, and follow through with your vowels. I mean, she really drilled it into me.
Does it tend, or did it tend to make you pick repertoire because you like the words before you like the music?
Definitely words. Definitely, there's no doubt about it. And if there's a happy blending of the two, I'm in heaven.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
You have a particularly, I don't know the adjective, a particularly pure kind of voice.
Very
Does
white
that
voice would be a
ever,
good
does that
description.
ever, or did it ever restrict your repertoire in an area that you wouldn't want to have had it restricted?
Yes. In fact, I would love to have been an operatic singer, and it just wasn't a voice for that. And in fact, thank God for musical comedy, because that's really, it sort of just fell into that groove very happily.
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air, with one enormous chair. How wouldn't it be lovely? Lots of chocolate for me to eat, lots of coal making lots of heat. Warm face, warm hands, warm feet, how wouldn't it be lovely? Oh, so lovely, sitting abso-bloomin' still. I would never budge till spring crept over me windowsill, someone's head resting on my knee, warm and tender as he can be, who takes good care of me. How wouldn't it be lovely, 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 lovely?
How come you never did a stage show play?
I was just too swept up in films and always wanting to be satisfied with what I was doing in films. And I'd be satisfied for the moment, but then I would be dissatisfied shortly thereafter and off to another challenge trying to do it better.
But it would seem to me that on stage you have a chance to correct something much more easily than you would on film. In other words, if you're dissatisfied with something on film, it's a hell of an expense and an effort to do it again. Whereas if you're out of town with a play and you say that didn't work, well, 2 nights later it could be something else again, especially if you wrote it.
You know, I suppose, I'm sure that's absolutely true. But I think really what I'm saying, simply put, is that I didn't feel that I had really made it in film. I don't feel, even to this day, that I've really made it in film. And I wanted to feel that before I went on to something else.
You did cycles of enormously successful films in a certain genre, right in a row. You did all those, you know, detective things. You did the psychological things. Then you did all the famous farces and comedies. And it seems to me, remembering from my own background in Hollywood, that when you get very good at something, people tend to put you in that pigeonhole. Now, when you were in the middle of Experiment in Terror and you wanted to make a farce, was there objection from, I mean, would they say, well, he doesn't do those?
I don't think any of that really came up at that stage of my career. I think that they began to impose their judgments on me, I think, at a certain period of time when I was making the most money for them. And that happened to be when I was doing farce, when I was doing the Pink Panthers. But I also took advantage of them because knowing that I wanted to do other things, I would make a deal. I would say, look, I'll do a Panther for you if you'll do this, if you'll allow me to do this film. And only in that way could I have been able to do SOB, Victor Victoria, and 10.
Really? 10
yeah.
was a bargain you struck?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it sure was.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, it
Because
took
would
me
seem
6 years to, I had written it 6 years before, and I could never, everybody in town turned it down.
And SOB was about 10 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, SOB, no, was about the same.
SOB wasn't a specifically brought on vendetta against anybody.
Vendetta, I guess vendetta could be used, sure.
I mean, you've never been, forgive me, but you've never been the absolute darling of what's known as the front office.
No, never been the flavor of the month.
No,
Never,
so...
no.
He always had such a good time on his sets that people used to automatically assume that he wasn't doing any work, that it was all very frivolous, and you know, that it wasn't
Well, that's hardly
serious.
possible once you see the product.
I know.
But no, but you do have a fairly outrageously good time while you're shooting.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yes.
oddly enough, it seems to me it breeds a fair amount of envy. You know, why should he be so successful and having a good time as well? You know?
Oh yes, I'm sure it breeds endless amount of envy from your directing and writing colleagues. But I'm talking about the curious kind of back and forth that happens between the head of a studio, who is usually, especially today, and correct me if
No,
I'm
but that's
wrong,
where it seems to come from in a way, isn't it? Am I
but
right
they don't
there?
know, they're not really movie people anymore, are they, basically?
You know, at one time there were movie people. They didn't begin as movie people, the Harry Cohns and the Samuel Goldwyns and people like that. They were cloak and suitors, song pluggers, whatever, who came out here and got into the motion picture business and became movie people. But then they were a particular original breed. They were the movie people as far as I was concerned. Since that time, what I have observed is the so-called movie people were people that would come in and take charge, and they would come from every aspect of life that didn't belong in charge of a studio. They just didn't have the credentials for it.
Have you ever had a really, without going into particulars, I mean a really major row with one of them, so that you said, that's it, I'm through?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah? You make it sound like every Wednesday.
Yeah, just about. I went through all of them, I guess, at one time or another.
I think that's kind of wonderful.
Yeah. Yes, and there are too many judgments made by committee. You know, I think the difference, you know, the Goldwyns and the Cohens and even the Mayers, whether you liked them or not, was really beside the point. They had a kind of passion about what they did. Their investment in their studio. They were that studio. I mean, it was as much of them as anything could be. It was more of them than their home and family and everything else. And they gave you answers. They may not have been answers you liked, but boy, you got them.
Yeah.
And you knew when you talked to them what the ground rules were. Since they've gone, that doesn't exist anymore.
Julie, when you did Mary Poppins, was Disney like that? I never met him. Was he involved like that?
Yes, I'll say he was.
Really?
He was quite often the first one in the studio, and I mean at like 7 in the morning, other than perhaps somebody that was in for makeup or something, but certainly before any of the writers came in or the designers came in, he would come in and quietly wander. I'm told this was so, I wasn't there to see him, but he would quietly wander from office to office and sort of look under, pages and so on, and he'd have a very keen idea as to what was going on in the whole studio that way.
I was sitting in my office working one night, and the lights went out. And I yelled and got up and said, "Who the hell turned out the lights?"
Where was this?
At Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just a rather poorly paid writer at that point. And the lights went back on, and I was faced with Harry Cohn. He said, "I turned them on." Who wants to know? He didn't know who I was, and I did know who he was. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm writing." He said, "Oh, in that case, you can leave them on." He used to go around and turn the lights off.
Harry Cohn,
In his
who owned the
studio.
studio?
Sort of
Yeah,
save
who
the
owned
money
studio,
for the electricity.
saving money. Yeah.
When you first went to work in films, did you go purely as a writer?
Yes. Well, that wasn't when I began. I began as an actor.
He's a terrific actor, by the way.
What, as a juvenile?
Yeah, or young, early 20s. Yeah.
To be a young actor in the movies, especially in those days, I would have thought was a wonderful kind of seduction, It's the kind of glamour that one finds out much later is fraudulent,
Thank God you found it out much later.
Yeah. And no, it would have kept you from having a good time if you found out about it right away.
Sure.
But even then, you thought, no, it's fun to do this, but this is not what I'm going to do with my life?
No, I only got as far as half of that. This is fun to do this, and I really didn't even want to think beyond that.
Did you think that you would rather be John Ford than Farley Granger?
Eventually I did.
I think it came from writing first, didn't it, Blake? I mean, you wrote something and then didn't like the way it was
writing,
being
I
directed.
found that I liked that,
Mhm.
and that's the way I wanted to go, that would be the way I wanted to go. And
Well, you
still
kind of-
is my first love.
Did you get any of that from your family background?
Well, I think I probably did, maybe more on an unconscious level, because I grew up in it. My father was an assistant director, a production manager. And he began as an actor, became a leading man in silent films for a brief period of time. His father was a director. So all of that was constantly around me. I mean, I can remember at very early age looking at stills that my grandfather had made in Egypt when he shot Cleopatra, and
He made the Theda Bara, Cleopatra?
the original Cleopatra, yeah,
So you're the third generation director?
right, yeah.
That's really, I mean, you find that with cellists in the Vienna Philharmonic, but it's very, very hard to do that in the film industry. You have another ancestral claim that I want to pursue, because your real name, complete, is William Blake.
That's right.
And you told me when I was kind of twitting you about it that William Blake, is no joke, was an
No.
ancestor of yours.
Yes, it's an ancestor of mine.
You can actually go to your family
Yep,
tree and go back
right-
to William Blake.
Right down to William Blake.
So you get the directing through Theda Bara and the writing from William
Sure.
Blake.
Yes.
That's not bad. Your jokes, let me put this as gently as I can, tend to be extremely cruel, and therefore reduce most people, in this particular instance me, to rubble, because I don't think anything is funnier than something totally physical. To what extent do you plan those, and to what extent do they come up because of something that you're looking at through the finder?
I think probably 50-50. I think I plan a lot of it.
Mm.
But quite often when I'm there on the set, something will come to me and will really amuse me, and I just can't resist it, and I'll do it.
I was just going to say, Andre, the great fun for me as a wife is to listen to Blake writing a very funny screenplay, because it's almost as if he stands outside himself, and I can hear him. We have a study in our house in Switzerland that's above the bedroom, I hear him chuckling away and hooting with laughter up there, and he quite often he'll come down and say, "Listen to what this idiot says," and it's like he hadn't written it. It's you know.
But I'm actually talking about, obviously the verbal jokes are wonderful, but I'm thinking, you know, I've discussed it with you. You do things that really are
painful.
No. I'm talking about they really come from generically, if you like, from Laurel and Hardy or
Sure.
Mr. Keaton and those people.
Right.
And I would think it would be very hard to write those until you actually see in 3 dimensions.
It's not hard to write them. It's very hard for people, most people, to read them and to get anything out of them. I kind of understand them. You would understand them. Most people don't until they see them up there.
But his mind goes like 3 steps beyond. How far can I push this so it becomes doubly painful, and then triply painful, or what, you know, trebled.
Yeah, and then it pays off 2 reels later again.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
sure.
that's, most people would sort of think to stop there, and that's why I think they become so excruciatingly painful, because they go way beyond any boundary that we would sort of, we'd normally stop somewhere this side of it, you know.
No, but I've always, I mean, I have
Andre
certain,
wouldn't.
I have
No,
certain
he wouldn't, I
favorites.
No.
The man getting out of the taxi in front of the airport during a howling storm, that's a great favorite of mine. That's wonderful.
Transworld Airlines Starstream Flight 24 for Chicago and Dayton will depart from Gate 39. Passengers may proceed to the gate area for check-in. Passengers may proceed to the gate area for check-in.
But I mean, you actually sat in your study upstairs in Switzerland and thought that one out?
Sure, yeah.
That's a kind of mad genius, you know that, because
Good,
it's...
I'm glad.
And also his outtakes, if you think these are outrageous, you
Oh,
should see the
God.
really outrageous outtakes.
Do you have reels
He
of
has
those?
Yeah.
reels
Yeah.
of outtakes.
Has he made you do
go
things
with-
like that you wouldn't have thought of?
I think I'm probably too controlled, aren't I, Blake, most of the time?
For the
I'd love
Panther.
to.
We
No,
dressed
but I
up
mean-
once for the Panther as a German housemaid with huge breasts and, you know, donuts here. And,
Yeah.
And a real Fraulein.
Yeah.
And we didn't tell Sellers. And he's in this tiny room in this basement. And we sent her in to clean.
With the vacuum cleaner.
And we never used it. We never left it in the film. And Sellers, in the outtakes, you know, he knew that a maid was supposed to come in. It was indicated. But then he heard this, Guten Tag, and in she comes. And he now, you can see him begin to twig that it's Julie. And he tries to keep a straight face. And he tries
Happily,
to-
it is on the cutting room.
It
was on the cutting room
is
floor.
really funny. So-
But you see, as long as you say you've never really played anybody like that, and you said before just now that you were always too controlled, that is if you like, a popular image of you, perpetrated by Mary Poppins and Sound of Music, that
Yeah.
I, because I've had the pleasure of knowing you personally, have never seen.
Oh.
I mean, I don't see where you are all that starched and prim.
I guess, I don't know if I've just embraced the image because other people have, or whether I think I recognize in myself that there's a certain crisp quality that comes through.
Yes, but you had a bumper sticker on your car that said Mary Poppins is a junkie.
Yes, I loved it. Yeah. No, I'd love to do one of those mad characters. I'm always wanting to really cut loose, and I guess that particular kind of screenplay just doesn't float under your nose every day.
Can you actually identify with some of what purports to be pop music now?
If you're asking me, only really because my kids do. I sort of pick up on a few things. I can't identify with it. I sort of vaguely know what's about.
But can
I'm
you
very
tell?
old-fashioned.
I mean, if you turn the car radio on, and the kind of bleating starts, can you tell?
We know where you stand, that's
Yes.
for sure.
I mean, can you tell what? Can you say? Oh yes, those are the running sores. I
No,
mean, do you
no.
know? No, I'm sorry. I mean, can you tell who's doing it?
No,
Can you understand the lyrics?
No, I'm terribly pleased when I can. I mean, it's certainly for my kids, it really puts me in great with them when I can say, ah, that's Cyndi Lauper or that's, you know, Madonna. But I so seldom can do it. I sort of stopped at the Beatles, and that was only because
Yes.
we had children that knew the Beatles, you know.
Yes, I stopped at the Beatles, whom I admired boundlessly and still do. But you see, there's something
I didn't then, but I do now.
Yeah.
Did you then?
No.
Ah!
No, but I do now. I tell you something, though, that suddenly occurs to me, is that up until and including the Beatles, a songwriter's raison d'etre was to write something that as many people as possible would then subsequently sing. And now, all the kids are performers themselves, and they write a song for themselves to sing, and nobody touches it.
But also, it's only for 11 or 13-year-olds, isn't it? Always.
That's
There's
the
it's
adult
not,
stuff, yes.
Yeah.
But do you think that, you see, when, all right, you were in Fair Lady and Camelot, and those songs went rocketing around. You know.
And had great lyrics, and they had
Oh,
inner rhymes, and they really actually rhymed. The interesting thing is that
in terms of
I don't know
films.
about your kids, but our kids, for the few performers that do record an old, let's say Willie Nelson, for instance, does. I can't think of something. What'll I do? Or
He's the one with the beard?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No,
I
but
just
but it's a joy, and people buy it and are thrilled to discover an old song, and they say, "Oh, it's a wonderful new song." And I'll say to my daughters, "No, that's quite an old one, my love. It comes from way back." And they'll say to me, "How do you know this?" in a big put down, and I'll say, "Because it was written long before you were born."
Well, but by the same token, there are groups now that take classical things and play them.
What do you think about that?
Well, I would visit them in prison if they were done right by. I tell you why. If you go into the Louvre, and you draw a mustache on the Mona Lisa, you do get put away for it. You know, and quite rightly. So if you take the theme from the Mozart G minor symphony, and you make it sound moronic, why should you make money? You should be imprisoned. I mean, I'm
just going to be
it's a severe thought.
the devil's
right,
advocate, but the fact that it exposes the Mozart to a whole new
No,
generation.
No, it doesn't.
That
It
it wouldn't make
exposes
them go out and buy it.
a revolting parody of it. You know.
I see.
I don't think it
you should
leads
be the
people
first
to
one to
hearing it.
agree. I mean,
I do. I was
what
just
was
arguing
it
for the
the
fun of
one that
arguing.
used to drive you crazy? I guess it was it Strauss? Was it? There was a modern version of, I can't remember what it was.
No, because for instance, the 2001 usage of Strauss, that I thought was brilliant. Because it didn't change it. It just used that 1-2 minutes. It's very funny because,
And everybody loves it.
everybody loves
And
it.
that
But the
goes
fact
across the
that
generation.
piece, Zarathustra, is 40 minutes long, dismays people who adore the main title from 2001, and then they suddenly
Yeah.
realize he
Yeah.
ain't going to quit for
Yeah.
another half hour.
Yes, yes.
You know, when Blake made the movie 10, he used Ravel's Bolero.
Sure.
And it became a hit all over again. Everybody went out and bought Ravel's Bolero.
Well, yes, because they found a new usage for it.
Yeah.
Don't you think that the songs that we're criticizing so wildly also that it laps over into things like movie scores? I don't like many movie scores anymore.
No, I absolutely hate them. A, because they all sound the same, with the exception of, it seems now that each month they get a little louder.
Yeah, there are a couple of very talented people writing good things, but
Oh,
leave
I'm
that.
not, s- no,
Yeah.
I'm not talking, I'm talking generally out
Yeah.
there.
Well, I think it goes hand in hand with the attitude that started in the 60s, which was where studio people said, write an album, and we'll see if we can work it into the movie. I'm convinced it happened, because the albums would be pretty good, but they unfortunately had very little to do with the movie. And
That's a good point. And then, of course, I suppose, having made a movie, they would make an album of it, and it wouldn't be, they would buy it because it reflected the movie, so you still got not terribly good music in that sense. Do you see what I'm saying?
no.
Oh.
Actually,
Forget about it,
what?
Andre. It's too
Darling,
detailed to
neither
explain.
do I.
No, never mind. This happens once in a while.
There is a kind of disdain that I think anyone who's bothered to learn music has for the harmonic idiocy of the songs. Now, and again, we're generalizing, please. Don't you think so?
Well, we had a conversation about 5 years ago or 10 years ago or something, and you said that it's just basically all the real rock stuff is only like, what, 4 basic chords?
Yes, and that was 5 years ago. It's been reduced
Yeah.
to 3. No, it's true. It's basically tonic, dominant, subdominant, and you're finished. Now, I tell you what I go through. Sometimes I hate myself for being so stuck in a certain mold, and when I'm in a record shop, I see there's a new group from, I don't know, doesn't matter, from Scandinavia or something, and I read the liner notes on the album, and they are more complex than anything written about the operas of Michael Tippett. And I think, hey, listen, you know, I'm going to, and I buy the thing and I take it home. It's the same 3 chords. It's just that the verbiage gets more and more dense, and it bothers me.
Are we just desperately old-fashioned? I can see that, you know, here we are at our this vast age, and all suddenly putting down all the youthful.
No, I don't think so.
Vim and vigor. I'm not sure.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I have, for instance, musically, when it comes to what, for lack of a better classification, I would call concert hall music, there I'm not in the least old-fashioned. I like all kinds of experimental things.
I can remember the first time I saw Jackson Pollock, and I didn't like it. But I noticed that I violently didn't like it, that it continued to bother me.
Yeah.
And I became very interested in that emotion, because I know that that's telling me something. And so I wanted to find out why I didn't like it. And I began to discover Jackson Pollock, and I began to discover a whole different world. And I wish I had a Jackson Pollock right now.
Yes.
But I can't do that with this music. I try. I really do
But you
try.
see, I think that because there is no mystery to solve.
Yeah,
That's
I
because
think that's
it's
what
based
it is.
on the
you
4 or 3 chords that you were talking about.
I think that if something is interesting enough to actually shock you or revolt you, then there's probably something in it. But something that so quickly turns to boredom usually doesn't have much in it. It's without a riddle.
I tell you, there is one thing I did discover, though, that it's great to dance to, and it still is. Something, I've forgotten what it was the other day, but I was in a discotheque or somewhere like that, and some of this music came on, and suddenly the beat was so insistent that one sort of got swept along in it. And
The 2 of you were in a discotheque? the
no,
other
no,
night?
I'm just trying to
find
remember
out
where
when
it was.
She was there.
I was gonna
No,
say,
it was some place, some club that we had to go for. I can't remember where it was.
We?
who
no,
had to go?
really.
She's got
This is
a mouse
turning
in her
into a
pocket.
different show, but that's
Yeah,
it's interesting.
yeah. Would you like to explain where you are? Where have you been the last few days, now?
Lay off.
I wasn't
you guys.
with you.
Lay off.
Shall I call Nigel Debs?
Yes.
When you started to sing, you were vaguely how old?
About 7 or 8.
And you were a big hit singing by the time you were, what, 11, 12?
12, yeah.
All right. Now, this is a naive question. Most women or men who sing that kind of well, that precociously, don't particularly want to add another talent to it. In other words, you know, when Janet Baker, whom you admire, or Kiri or anyone, when they first produce a voice that is wonderful, it wouldn't occur to them that they would need to add acting. Do you see what I mean? I mean, they're a singer. This is it. I'm this singing person. What made you suddenly decide that quite independent of singing, that you also had to be an actress?
I suppose perhaps circumstances that I needed for the field that I finally found, you know, for the stream that I finally found myself in. I needed the acting ability.
Yeah, but when you were still the dummy's girlfriend on that show, I mean, did you want to be John Sutherland or Callas? Or did you want to be Peggy Ashcroft?
Well, I
mean,
think
it's a
that's the
fair
second
question.
thing I was going to say, is that I think I realized that I couldn't be. And perhaps that had something to do with it, that the voice wasn't going to be that. I just sort of always felt that it wasn't quite what it should have been. I don't know why I knew that, but I did.
But that's almost impossible to tell when you're that kind of child.
I don't know, Andre, but
Well, did you want to be a great actress? Did you get bitten by that?
I think part of me always wanted to be sort of legitimate. I always felt like I was sort of on the wrong side of the tracks. I was in music hall, and I would love to have. I always felt that people knew something that I didn't, either in the legitimate music field or in the theatre, and I just wanted to know it. I wanted to embrace it. And I
Did
think
you go to RADA?
no, nothing like that. I never had any formal training. It really, what my life seems to consist of enormous, very, very fortunate leaps, and then an enormous scrambling on my part to understand it and comprehend it and know what it was I had done.
You see, what I'm trying to get at in a very circuitous and probably not very deft way is you've had a career which is the fulfillment of a fantasy for almost any young performer.
That's for sure.
Is it actually the career that was your private fantasy when you were beginning? I mean, is this what you wanted to do, or did you think maybe it would veer off?
Well, they do say beware of what you really wish for because you're going to get it. And I suppose I only know that when I was sort of 9, 10, and 11 and dreaming, that I wanted to be very, very good at what I did. I didn't want to do it shoddily or badly. I just knew I wanted to be very good. And I didn't mind what it was, but I think somewhere inside of all that, I must have had some idea. But the thing that turns me on is being able to do as much that is as varied as possible.
Well, I think all three of us do, probably, in the eyes of a lot of people, too many different things. But on the other hand...
it's a very interesting discussion, actually. How do you know when you are genuinely stretching your boundaries, and how do you know when you have overstepped them? And I've been trying to find that one out all my life.
Only by overstepping them.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. If you're one of those people that are inclined to push and push on the boundaries, that's the only way you ever find out whether you've gone too far. And sometimes, you go much too far and you suffer because of it, but it's a good lesson.
But you see, it's a fact that in today's media, if you like, there's very little room left to be bad. I mean, in the early days, when people went out on stage or in concerts or in whatever, if you were lousy for a while, well, that was okay. But you can blow it in a week now.
Yeah, there's no place to fail anymore.
But there's no real training ground, no place that you can, like
no place
musical,
to fail
where
safely.
you could go round and round and try things out again and again and again.
Yes. Did you used to like touring?
No, I hated it.
Really?
Yeah, because I had this tremendous need to be home. I had some kind of separation anxiety about leaving my family. And so I would travel literally anything from 24 hours just to be home 12 and then go back up to Edinburgh or something like that,
But it certainly separates the men from the boys, touring.
How do you feel about it? Is it a turn on or is it hard to be away from
It's
home?
both, but I like touring with orchestras. I mean, for 11 years I took the LSO out. I mean, never mind the world tours. We did 16 American tours alone, and I'm always out. I mean, this year I've got 2 tours, next year 3, and that's not what I'm not talking about traveling by myself. I'm talking about over 100 people at once.
Yeah. You must know an awful lot of good digs.
I tell you, what's nice about it is that the work becomes the saving grace. And the common enemy becomes the tour, as opposed to suddenly resenting the work you do. The reward is the night's work, and that is not a bad thing to arrive at.
No. And excuse me for pressing this, but how do you feel when you have to book yourself so far ahead? Do you get any kind of claustrophobia that the year is literally mapped out for you? Because I know in
yes. No, that's very odd.
In your world, it does have to be
it's-
booked so far
I
ahead.
have things for 4 years from now.
Oh,
which is
God. I don't know if I
very
could, I would feel
No,
like
but at
there would
least-
be no room for,
No, but you know you're going to work.
yes.
There is
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
There is that. But, so you always wanted to be home. Do you ever turn things down because on reflection it would be easier not to do this next thing but just to stay home? That's nice. Does it matter which part
That's
of the world
based on,
that's...
no, it's sort of based on, too, what the family's up to and how the kids are managing and if they're secure. Usually if the family's very secure, I feel much better about traveling.
Yes,
I
but
think we'd travel much more if we hadn't taken on a whole new family. One whole generation has grown up, and now we
Yes.
have another one. So
But there is a point in every performer's life where I think we're on the way to the airport, you say, why am I doing this?
of course,
Sure. As the house disappears and back.
And was
But
it the right choice? And,
interestingly, though, we kind of had the best of 2 worlds with that. If we're usually going to the airport, it's because we're going back to the home in Switzerland. So we don't usually say, why am I doing this? We know damn well what we're doing.
Well, it sounds happy all around. I'm glad you
so
do it
far
on
it has
both continents, both privately and professionally.
Well, it's we're very blessed at being able to do it that way. I mean, it's really wonderful.
Well, so is everybody that sees your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andre.